witch hunt, or justice for Nazi war crimes of the past? Is Anton Tittjung of Greenfield being held accountable for his role in history, or is he merely being made a scapegoat? Punishments for the past. It's what Milwaukee is talking about this morning. Good to have you with us this morning. Katharina Tittjung is the wife of Anton Tittjung, and you are very familiar with his story. He is the 66-year-old Greenfield man who was recently stripped of his American citizenship after accusations that he was once a concentration camp guard. His case is now on appeal. Katie is with us now in the studio, along with Eve Kaler, who is a researcher and historian serving on the board of directors of the Danube German Society of America. She is very familiar with the Tittjung family and the issues surrounding their case. Let's applaud both women for being here today to discuss this hot topic. Mrs. Tittjung, I've got a pile of stuff here, and your story actually goes back to 1988.
Yeah.
When you received a letter from the United States government telling your husband to report to the federal building in Milwaukee to justify what went on roughly between 1939 and 1945. Your family has been going through these questions for several years now. Your hearing was held, your husband's hearing was held back in November. Judge John Reynolds issued a decision in December.
Mm-hmm.
And now your husband is facing deportation.
Well, right now the case is on appeal, and we don't know how it's going to turn out.
What has it been like for you since you first received that letter?
Well, it wasn't easy because, first of all, we didn't know what was going on. We thought we were here almost 4 years. You know, why they were even questioning us now? Because we immigrated with everybody else after the war when they started relaxing the quotas and letting the people in. So we had no idea what was going on.
You must have been scared.
Well, yeah. Yeah, you get scared. And you see the emblem on there, and it says the Justice Department, you know, the government, you don't know.
Our purpose in inviting you here today is to learn your side of the story and to learn exactly what your husband's role was in World War II. And we would like you to explain that to us. What was his role?
Well, I don't know where I should start. He was 17, not quite 18, when he got called to join the Waffen-SS. And my main thing is because they keep saying that all our men volunteered, and they did not. You got to think back 50 years. They keep saying, you know, like they were all waiting there just to join the Hitler's Waffen-SS. Our men were farmers, most of them. There was no radio, there was no electricity, there was no television. Nowadays, it's hard for people to even picture or to go back 50 years because in every room they have a television. The kids run around with the earphones and radios on, and you have, how many newspapers do we have here in Milwaukee?
Yes.
There was maybe once a week a newspaper that people would receive. They didn't know what was going on.
And you're saying your husband was called to service.
Yeah.
What was his role with the Waffen-SS?
Well, he was a private, and see, I didn't know him. I met him first in Austria after the war. So he's being accused of being a guard.
At the Mauthausen complex in Austria?
Well, they say at Grossramming, but it's the government's accusation.
How did you meet your husband?
Through his sister-in-law. We were all, we were evacuated from Yugoslavia in 1944, October 5th, we had to leave. We had 3 hours to pack up and leave.
Some people think that the fact that your husband was a guard at Mauthausen was a member of the SS in itself should carry the responsibility, in part the responsibility for the Holocaust.
Now, what do you mean by that? Why? Who thinks that he should carry it?
Some people think the fact that he was merely wearing the uniform and was serving as a guard in itself,
that's what...
that he should share the responsibility.
Yeah. But
how do you feel about that?
I don't feel that he should bear the responsibility.
Why not?
Because he was a private, he was a soldier, he was doing what he was told. And plus, we are not saying that he was a guard. The government is accusing him.
When you were admitted to the United States in 1952, 39 years ago, you had to fill out certain paperwork.
Yeah.
You had to tell the United States government in your immigration paperwork what your husband did in terms of his military service. Judge Reynolds, in his ruling, in essence, has said, your husband held back on that military information.
Well, that's to be questioned. He filled out everything that was on the questionnaire. There was about 100 questions. In fact, there is a paper, a newspaper where they are quoting Judge Reynolds that he said, show me where it says in the papers that he was a concentration camp guard.
Eve, you have been following this case, you have been following the issues surrounding it through the updating, through the amendment of the Immigration Act, an effort to bring Nazi war criminals to justice. You see this as two different things here. Why?
Yeah, Mark, I do. Sorry I couldn't put my Navy nude uniform on this morning, but certain parts of me just won't fit in anymore.
Now just speak from your heart. You're a researcher and historian.
Yes.
You have looked at this issue. Speak from your heart. We are talking about two different issues here. We're talking about a broad stroke being taken by the United States government versus people who should be held accountable for the Holocaust. Explain that to me.
When you get a letter from the Department of Justice, and you are an immigrant, and you have always respected authority wherever you lived in your host countries, you are going to run down and answer questions because it says Department of Justice. On the bottom, however, it talks about this little agency called the Office of Special Investigations, which is seldom mentioned in any news article. The Holtzman Amendment is never mentioned.
Let's explain the Holtzman Amendment, adopted by Congress in 1978.
Yes, and was effective in October 1979.
Which in effect, and Eve, I think what we can do here, and perhaps what we should do, is read the summary of what the Holtzman Amendment was all about.
Yes, there's only 4 lines.
Read, do you have that before you? If not, I'll paraphrase. October of '78, the Office of Special Investigations, a branch of the Department of Justice, was created to carry out its mandate to deport from the United States all aliens who persecuted any person on the basis of race, religion, national origin, or political opinion under the direction of the Nazi government of Germany and for other purposes. This, in essence, is the legal clout the United States government used to go after your husband.
Right, but Mark, there was no public debate. Nobody knew it was being passed. There was a voice vote. There were prominent dissenters, including Congressman Henry Hyde, who is supposed to be the constitutional scholar in Washington, and our own Bob Kastenmeier. And they say in their dissent, in effect, and I can read the exact words if you want, in effect, that what was legal in the 1950s suddenly is illegal in 1979. That is an ex post facto law. Is that constitutional? Is that what we want? Remember what Lutheran pastor Niemöller said. Before he was sent to Sachsenhausen, he was in opposition to Hitler. He said, first they came for the Jews and no one spoke out. Then they came for the Catholics and no one spoke. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak. Today I'm speaking not only for this good Catholic family, but for the Jews too. Because what the OSI is doing is building a new wall between us,
all right, now
which
we're
is not
talking about
necessary.
Two different issues here. We are talking about the legal clout that is being used in this country to address the war crimes of the past. We're also talking about a Greenfield family here, the Tittjungs, who are being called upon by the government, in part emotionally and legally, to pay for part of that wrongdoing. Is that right? Is the United States government using too broad of a stroke to make amends for what happened more than 40 years ago? I think those are two important questions. When we come back after this commercial break, you will meet a Jewish survivor from the Holocaust and a leader from Milwaukee's Jewish community. How do they feel about this issue arising in Milwaukee? We'll be right back. Punishment for the past. Milwaukee is talking about the Anton Tittjung case, which is arising in Milwaukee. And with us now to present their concerns in this issue are Mr. Walter Peltz, who survived 5 years in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz and Dachau. He is a resident of Mequon in suburban Milwaukee. We're also joined by James Fromstein, who is, of course, is president of the Milwaukee Jewish Council. Let's applaud these gentlemen for being here today as well. Walter, what are we talking about here?
Well, what we are talking about here is, of course, it's something, a thing from the past, but I think that we should keep it alive, especially when it comes to people like Mr. Tittjung, and this is something that we did not start it. The government of the United States did. We did not try to look up Mr. Tittjung. This is a case of the United States government, which we've got laws in this country, and I'm glad of it. But the reason I'm here is to testify, because I was 5 years in the concentration camps and death camps, and I've seen a lot of Mr. Tittjungs there. And I think that our government made a statement that we've got about 2,200 more Tittjungs in this country, which they came to this country on a false pretense. I would like to make a statement first, please. Of course, that this so many years went by, I sure do feel sorry for the Tittjung family. I think the lovely lady, Mrs. Tittjung, hasn't got nothing to do with it. His children, of course not, and his grandchildren. I think it's very sad that his children and grandchildren had to find out that their father or grandfather was involved in those atrocities. On the other hand, there's millions and thousands of us which we were persecuted for no reason at all because of our religious beliefs, and Christian people the same way. That my parents didn't have the privilege to live long enough to see their children off and having grandchildren. Well, Mr. Tittjung came, I mentioned it before, I watched the TV, on a false pretense because he did not fulfill that application.
All right, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on that.
Yes.
Yeah, Jim, this is tough. I mean, Milwaukee is divided.
Oh, I think it's absurd that Milwaukee is divided. I don't think it's divided at all. I can't imagine that.
Why?
Because I think that we're demonstrating to ourselves and to others now the depths to which one can sink when confronted by misguided leadership. What I heard here prior to our coming on was a little bit silly, that there are accusations that Tittjung was a member of the Death's Head Battalion and a guard at Mauthausen concentration camp. I have, and anyone can have, a copy of the roster of the people who were in that battalion. I didn't bring it with me because this isn't a Senator McCarthy inquiry. It was evidence in the court. It was part of the evidence on which Judge Reynolds based his decision for conviction in this case. And it's known, and it was my understanding that there was no denial of the fact that he was a concentration camp guard. I think that Anton Tittjung himself is not quite so important. He was a Nazi concentration camp guard in a death camp at Mauthausen. 122,000 people died at Mauthausen. Most of those people were Jewish. Many, many, many of them were not. And the job of a guard was to see that none of those people came out alive. And many of the people who were guards committed unspeakable atrocities against children and women, against families.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Some people have a lot of trouble with the process, though. Mr. Tittjung was not on criminal trial. Mr. Tittjung was on civil trial.
Yes?
The document that was introduced was challenged. The Tittjung family argues, even though their name appears on that roster of soldiers, he is not guilty of any war crimes.
I'm not charged with any war crimes.
Nor is he charged with any war crimes. That, as a matter of fact, that was part of the Mauthausen complex. Why are you focusing on him? Why do you want to see him kicked out of the country?
Well,
Why not focus on somebody else?
like whom? Like whom? Focus on whom?
Why not focus on someone who the United States government could attempt to prove was guilty of war crimes, as
Well,
opposed to his role?
I think first is first. Mr. Tittjung was, I think, brought up on the open because he did lie when he filled out this application. Now, let me ask you a question, please, if I may, okay? You know, if he would be innocent, if he would not be involved in those atrocities, I think Mr. Tittjung would not try to skip certain questions. I filled out the same application before I came to this country, number one. Number two, when every person becomes a citizen of the United States, the day you are being sworn in, whoever the judge is calling on the people, and he did say with those words, if there's anybody did forget to put answers on certain questions, or did not forget, but they didn't put on the questions for some certain reasons, now is the time to correct it. Mr. Tittjung did not even try to correct those questions. In other words, he tried, he lied on this application. The United States government, as far as I know, got the rosters like this gentleman did say before, and they did got a hold of Mr. Tittjung, they got a hold of another gentleman here, another guy here in the city of Milwaukee. Now, the question is this: why would we like to see, or I would like to see him kicked out from the country? No, I like to see justice.
What is justice?
I like justice that this person, if he should stay in front of a judge. Now, the United States right now does not accuse him of his atrocities. Of course, it's true. But if he would be sent back to his native country, Yugoslavia, or whatever he chooses, then I think he's going to. They're going to have a trial for him.
You don't want to see him deported.
No, I wouldn't
him-
like to see him. I would like to see justice.
And you would like to see him stand in a court of law and
Correct.
answer
Correct.
charges.
Whatever the court will decide,
In the United States or in Yugoslavia?
I would rather say it in his native country or in a native land where he was involved.
So far, he's not even afforded that opportunity, though.
No, that's not correct. The judgment's already been rendered in a
That's
court in the
correct.
United States.
But not as it pertains to alleged crimes.
Yes, this is a crime to fill out false papers on entry in the United States is a crime.
It sure is.
We'll take a break and come back and invite Mrs. Tittjung back, and perhaps we can all get together out here in the studio and have them talk with one another, perhaps, I believe, for the first time publicly, face to face. Stay with us.
To speak your mind, to meet celebrities. Your ticket.
Talking about Julia Child being with us on Friday. We're focusing this morning on punishments for the past. What is the United States government attempting to do in Milwaukee? Our particular focus is on the Tittjung family. Mrs. Tittjung is back in the studio with us, along with Eve Kaler, Walter Peltz, and James Fromstein. I believe this is the first time you folks have shared a stage.
Yeah, we're holding hands here.
Holding hands too. We are good friends.
Met him 15 years ago.
That's right.
Going to Benji's later.
That's right. I have corned beef.
Who's buying?
I'll buy it. I don't mind.
What's it like sitting on stage together? James, you feel so strongly about this, and you're just sitting 2 seats away from Katie, and her husband, a few months from now, could be headed to Europe for good. Now just lean over there, look at her, and you look at him.
Okay.
Lean back, please, Walter. Tell her how you really feel about what's going on here, face to face.
I'm uncomfortable.
Why?
I've been
It's
on
tough when she's here, isn't it? And it's tough when he's here.
No, I don't think that's
It
the
doesn't
point.
bother me a bit. I just want to ask him if he knows that my husband's father died in the concentration camp and that his mother was the only survivor. 6 other families died too, and it was after the war was over, while the Nuremberg trial was going on in Yugoslavia. How many people died there? We were first evacuated, then we were called displaced, and then we were expellees. And when our people started going back to Yugoslavia, they were put in concentration camps and died. My grandparents died. My cousin's little boy died. He wanted just a few beans to eat. He died of starvation. So it wasn't just the Jewish people that suffered.
There is
I feel
another side of the
sorry.
suffering,
I'm
is
not
what you're
trying to say that.
I agree with that completely. I don't feel that it's the Jewish people only that were the
But
victims
that
of the
was
Holocaust.
after
There were many, many, many more, millions more. Certainly, though, the Holocaust, the Jews were the major victim, and many of the atrocities that were perpetrated on Jews, and they were intended to be to eradicate the Jewish people
Well,
from
that could
Europe,
be
if not from
questioned.
the
That
world.
goes
Now,
the
I
same
said
for our
earlier
people.
that I was uncomfortable, and I think I'd like you to know why.
Please tell us.
After all, my friend Walter Peltz was through concentration camps. He's told this story many times. For me, I wasn't through it, but I'm here to testify for you that the subject of the Holocaust leaves a sadder or heavier heart for any Jewish person anywhere in the world than any other subject I can think of.
It is deep in one's gut.
Right, and
It is in one's soul.
anyone who doesn't understand that, doesn't understand the meaning of the Holocaust that we watched. I did only as a small boy at the time in America, from a great distance. Nonetheless, I heard things on the radio. I heard my parents and my neighbors and our friends talk of what was happening in Europe, and I knew that the world stood by at that time and did nothing.
It did the same.
However,
it did the
and I know it
same
was
in-
I acknowledge it was the same in Europe. I think Americans could have done more then. I think now is the time that most of us, I'm looking at your audience, I see many, many people who were alive during World War II. Some of you perhaps served in the armed forces during World War II. Nothing was done by the American government to stop the Holocaust, to prevent it, and it is our job now, finally, even 50 years later, for us finally to take the decent action, and that is to hold responsible those people who participated in them.
Eve, that's where you come in. You have trouble with the action the United States government is taking.
Yes, sir. In Cincinnati just yesterday, I swear Kathy has a pipeline to the man upstairs because this happened just yesterday in Cincinnati. A man admitted he was a Nazi guard in a camp near Kiel, Germany. He admitted he was a guard. The Federal Appeals Court turned over his conviction and said he will not be deported because he was forced into it. He did not abuse anybody. He would have been imprisoned and shot if he hadn't served. And my thought is, if they want to send back somebody like Tony, then ship out everybody who was in the Waffen-SS and who came in the 50s. Get the boats lined up and ship them back.
I'm for that.
I'm for that too. I want you to know. I am for that too.
Those people haven't earned the right to live in
heard
this country.
I
No matter
heard
what
so
the role
many
was.
times- I
matter
heard
what the
so
role
many-
was?
I heard so many times, and even from Mrs. Tittjung, and I don't blame her again that she's trying to fight for her husband, that he was put in a uniform, so did Father Schramm, that he was forced to put into this uniform. He was only 17 or 18 years old. Now, who can make more a statement than me and others that they were in the concentration camps and the death camps? I'd like to make a statement to you, if you never heard of it. They tried to prove that they are holier than the Germans. They were worse than the Nazis, the German Nazis in uniform.
Who are you talking about
Eve,
now?
now you come in.
Who are you talking about now?
About our people.
I'm talking about the people, the so-called Volksdeutsche, that they were taken into the uniforms, and to the SS. They were all volunteers, and I'm not talking out of my head.
You are saying that Anton could have said no to those letters.
He could have gone to a different branch, but they were too excited because when it came to the Jews, the propaganda always, if it was Yugoslavia or Poland, then please, just listen. You were not there. You've met your husband after the war, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't. You wasn't with him. Then he was in the camp when he was in uniform. What they did and what they didn't do.
Neither were you.
Wait a minute, but I've seen those. I know that there was none. I make a statement to you. There was none of the Germans or non-Germans that they were, or Volksdeutsche, that they were in the SS uniforms. They were all in the death camps.
Are we going to get some time too to talk?
That's right.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Fromstein once said that Tittjung was with his drinking buddies, the SS. Let me tell you, in my 20 years of research, talking to many Volksdeutsch, there was strict segregation between the German Waffen-SS and the Volksdeutsch Waffen-SS. They wanted nothing to do with each other. There was strict segregation then, and there is now. And the other thing about Cincinnati and these folks saying all the Waffen-SS should be sent back, well, can you imagine the chaos? And they will not be sent back to Yugoslavia, Walter, because they have to go back to where they came from, which is the DP camps in Austria, which means they will be in a little hole in some room somewhere, dying alone.
Isn't that terrible?
Yugoslavia will
Isn't that terrible?
will not take them back.
You know,
But what happened to my parents? I had 5 brothers and sisters. My father, my mother, not counting uncles. I am the only person left from my whole family.
Walter,
Watch them slaughtering and starvation. Who did it?
Walter, I have heard you many times at UWM and on TV, and I can tell you there are survivors right here in Milwaukee who can tell the exact same stories word for word in such gruesome detail that I can't put it in words. And there is more to bind us than to divide us, for heaven's sake. Are we going to be sucked into these black holes of history forever?
who should really be held accountable for the crimes of the past in World War II? That's our focus this morning. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Anton Tittjung is facing deportation because of his ties to World War II. His wife is in the studio with us now, representatives from the Jewish community, and we are reacting to what is happening here in the courts surrounding that issue. Go ahead.
All right, first of all, I'd like to make a statement. I, too, am a naturalized citizen. I do not remember that question that you stated earlier that a judge ever asked me. I filled out the papers. I went through my examination, and I was sworn in as a citizen of the United States. Second of all, statement was made that Anton Tittjung's sole job was to keep all prisoners and making sure they would die. How did you survive 5 years of a concentration camp? Third of all, you...
Let's go ahead. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. How did you survive?
How did I survive? Have you got about 24 hours?
You said his job was to kill the people off. How did you make it 5 years?
Hold a second, please. I did not say that. He was involved in it. I want you to know one thing. I live with it. So do a lot of people that they did survive. My friend, I was in the first death camp by the name of Majdanek near Lublin in Poland. It was strictly a death camp, and I was about 18 or 19 months there. Auschwitz, 2 years. I've seen day and night people walking from 5 abreast with their children with lies and signs that they're going to take a bath, a browse, whatever it is, that they're going to be with their families. They lied to them, and they were eliminated. Every night, and we went to bed in Auschwitz or Majdanek, we could look through those barbed wires. My friend, there was every day from the night shift about 2-3 stories of shoes, men, women, and children, which they were loaded up on trucks. They were, they were gassed, and the crematoriums, there were Jews working, only Jews, I want you to know. The Jews, guessing the Jews did not do, the Germans did.
And again, you
but-
are holding Anton Tittjung responsible for that.
Well, I am not holding Tittjung responsible for it.
You want him deported?
I am, wait a minute, if he deserves, I think, for the future, for my children, grandchildren, and even for your grandchildren, for anybody's children, once and for all, people that they were involved in it, that they can prove that they were involved in it, they should face the card. I am not pointing that finger that Mr. Tittjung was involved in it, I wasn't there. But everyone who was in those uniforms were involved. I can tell you some stories. When it came the worst day
I
of our
understand.
week was Sunday, I want you to know one thing, what they did on Sunday, only for fun, what they did to human beings. Ask me that after a while.
I am the one who made the statement that his job was to see that no one came out alive, and that didn't tend to imply that he killed them directly, but the fact that his job was to see that people didn't get out. And the only purpose for bringing people into Mauthausen was to work them to death in a stone quarry, or if they didn't die
Starvation.
that way, or starve to death, then they were put in a gas chamber. I was at Mauthausen after the war. This is what was there. And so
All right.
anyone who kept them in, his job was to see that no one came out alive.
You're
And if
saying
they-
a guard
they
should be
snuck
held
out, his
responsible.
job was to shoot him.
Okay, let's go back out here in the audience. Go ahead.
Okay, then let's use adequate procedures to prove that these individuals whom we are accusing of doing these things did these things. Let's have rules of evidence that support that they were personally, individually involved in doing this.
You know, I think we're all in agreement here, on the stage anyway, that the current system of calling people forward and attempts by the government to hold them accountable is not a fair system.
No, I don't agree with that. I think it's a fair system. It's necessary to prove in a federal court of law that somebody falsified papers. And if that happened, it's a violation of existing U.S. law, and the penalty for that is deportation.
But your real motive, though, when you say that, is to hold him accountable for the Holocaust.
My motive
I
is
mean-
to try to ensure that we prevent any Nazi who was anywhere near these crimes from living in freedom in the United States.
Well,
Because
why
I
aren't
mean,
you trying to get
It's
those
morally
that-
wrong for us to do that.
Okay, well, let's
Okay,
give
what
Katie a
happened
chance
to
to
the
talk.
people that killed our people? Are they being prosecuted?
The same.
There's no accountability
There
for
is-
those who
nobody's
killed our
doing
people.
nothing.
I would,
There's no-
I would
Our story
support
is
that.
not being told anywhere. The Holocaust is being taught in school, but our people, nobody is saying nothing. And after the show, if nobody comes forward who is smarter or more educated than I am, then we should be ashamed to be called Danube Schwabians, because our children and grandchildren have to know what happened to our people.
I support that point completely, and so does most of the Jewish community, that the education of people about the Holocaust should be complete. It was not
Then
only
why
Jews, and
was
there were-
nothing
there
said
were
about
many,
our
many other
people so
victims.
far?
Let's go back in the audience. Go ahead.
Mark,
Yes, I was at Anton Tittjung's trial, and it was a trial that lasted several days. He was found guilty of falsifying his papers. Now, if we say that we should forget about this because 40 years have gone by, and this man was a young man, he perhaps didn't really know what he was doing, what kind of message are we giving our children? Is it, do we tell our children it doesn't matter what you do, you're not held accountable? I think it's very important that people are accountable for what they've done, no matter how many years have gone by.
For falsifying papers.
Well, this is a law. I mean, the law stated that they were not, the United States was not accepting any Nazis into the country.
no, it didn't. Didn't say that.
He never answered the question that.
You're saying he followed the guidelines in
he did not
1952,
answer a question he was never asked.
that in 1978,
When the Holtzman Amendment
It
came
became
out,
more strict.
it was made retroactive.
ipso facto is the word you use.
Whatever
the
it
term you
is,
use.
but what was okay in 52 was all of a sudden not okay in 79.
Eve?
Well,
Well,
go ahead.
look how many Nazis the American government brought in, for heaven's sake, to work at NASA. And now Colonel Rudolph was kicked out. Now he wants to come back. I want to talk about enlistees. Sidnor had 2.5 days to testify in the court. I was there too. The immigration
Explain to us
official had 2
explain to us who
hours.
that witness is, Sidnor. Professor.
Sidnor was Professor Sidnor, who wrote a book on the Waffen-SS.
And
it's
he
a
verified-
very good book.
He verified
And-
the roles.
But he verified some of the things, but the authenticity of this particular sheet where his name is on is in dispute. It's at the appeals court.
But
when he-
I don't want to interrupt. You have that piece of paper, incidentally, don't you?
Oh, it's in my
But
purse.
Maybe
We're-
someone can get that for us, because you have brought that with you, and that is the evidence that was introduced at the trial. Someone please
Mark,
bring that
we're
to us.
talking about enlistees.
Go ahead.
Saying that all the Waffen-S was enlistees. That's baloney. We have survivors here who can say, we were forced to go or else. And Sidnor, in his own book, didn't read from the sections where he contradicts himself, where he admits there was great conscription in multinational countries of the Volksdeutsch.
All right,
And
this-
also the Nuremberg trials, the transcripts will show that it was illegal for Germany and their occupying armies to come into these countries, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, and enlist or recruit. That's in the Nuremberg transcripts. If we had money, M-O-N-E-Y, if we had money and research and lawyers who would do it for us, we would find that and show it.
All right.
And the German government followed those rules. That's going to be the day, if they followed rules.
The German government-
If they came into a country, in a city, they knew exactly how many Germans they've got there, because they did cooperate with them before even they did take away that country.
And did you know the two that refused and were sent to Dachau and spent the rest of the war in Dachau, and when they came back to Yugoslavia, they were killed?
All right,
There
we're
were
going
also
to take a
people who
break.
did that
We're
and
going to take a
survived.
break,
Wow.
and we're going to bring out that document that was introduced during the hearing, and the name Anton Tittjung appears on it. What in fact does it mean? Reaction from both sides of the issue in just a moment. Stay with us. All right, before our commercial break, we promised to bring out a document that was introduced during Anton Tittjung's hearing. One that Mrs. Tittjung lists his name. Is a document that allegedly came out of World War II and places your husband as a guard in the Mauthausen complex.
It supposedly is a Judy Rast that was disputed by the lawyer.
Can I hold this up to a camera, and as we leaf through it, can you explain to me what we're looking at here?
100.
Just on the first page, what are we
His
looking at
name
here?
is supposed to be number 100, and it's a 1 day out of his military time or whatever.
All right, I'm going to open up to number 100, and the print is very small. And again, this is the evidence that linked him allegedly
Which
to
is
the
being
Mauthausen complex.
questioned, yes.
Okay, number 100, Sturm, SS Sturm, which means
Sturman, I guess.
Soldier.
Yeah.
That's not a soldier, I'm sorry. That's a different word for it.
what does it mean?
It's an SS Sturmbannführer or Sturm?
No, Sturman.
Sturm.
S-T-U-R-M.
A Sturmbannführer.
Not band, no.
He's not a Führer.
Okay,
Huh?
so okay, there's a debate.
That's correct. That's
All
a
right, well-
Sturmabteilung.
Just to get
No,
I'm a
those
bit-
are, those
Not
are
that
the people.
means-
All right.
Yeah.
Not that either.
The bottom line is his name, Tittjung, appears as number 100 on this roster. What is this roster all about? What?
It's supposed to be a Judy Rast that he had in a camp, and I said if Germany had paperwork like that, no wonder they lost the war.
Because it was so sloppy. And according to her lawyer, it is not authenticated, and that's at the appeal court
You
now.
doubt the authenticity of this
Yes.
document.
Absolutely.
You gentlemen say this document is real. This places him as a prison guard at the Mauthausen concentration
Complex.
camp.
It's been the judgment of a federal court to that extent, not only my opinion. I don't know how to authenticate a document.
All right, but my point is this. This is the only hard evidence that was introduced during the hearing. This is it.
That's enough.
That's enough. It's right. What do you expect that they should put in that document? That this person was involved in the gas chamber, or this person was involved of killing or making experiments of human beings?
What if it's wrong?
Mark, in an American court
What
and in a
if?
military court,
What if?
the introduction of a morning report, for example, from a military unit, all of you who
Why
have
don't
been in the
they-
Army
why don't
know
they have a
that
jury
that is
trial?
sufficient evidence and documentation of a man being AWOL, for example.
All right.
Any document of that type is sufficient evidence.
We've got to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Stay with us. A couple more minutes on the air now. Well,
I do a lot of lecturing.
Walter, I'll get to you.
Yes, good.
You have something, Mrs. Tittjung,
Yes.
you want to read briefly, and we have to move along, and I'm going to let you read a few lines of it. It
That
means something
shouldn't
to
take
you.
very
Go
long.
ahead.
Okay.
What are you reading?
It
us,
says,
Mr.
"Dear fellow citizens, I extend to you a warm welcome to citizenship of the United States of America. George Washington, the first president of the United States, once said this to his fellow citizens: the name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism. By your free choice, you have become citizens of this country. The name of American is now yours. As an American, you now share not only the rights of all Americans, but the common heritage which has always called forth the just pride of patriotism. As an American, you now have the opportunity to engage in the most rewarding activity of a free man, full participation in the democratic process of a self-governing people. Our Constitution begins with the words which we all know, we the people. We the people, your fellow citizens by birth and choice, salute you because on this day you have become a most valued citizen of the United States."
All right.
It's from the President of the United States. Now I have to
Now,
say,
what was the year?
that was in '74,
From the President,
yes, of the United States.
after you and your husband became naturalized citizens.
Yes, but
All
I'm
right,
saying
all
we
right.
were very proud and honored when we got this letter. But it scares me that in a free country like the United States, one man has the power to take your citizenship away without a jury trial. I think there is something very, very wrong.
All right, we understand your frustration.
That is the law, however, and the law is open to change in this country. So if you think it's unfair, you can do it, but right now that's the law. And I think that it's just immoral that people like us who were alive during the war and knew what happened afterward are not willing to stand up now and to say that this country went through enough in those years so that it is not up to us to take in people who were involved with the atrocities that in any way and that they have no place in this country. That is now our moral responsibility, and it is our responsibility to pass on to our children and grandchildren exactly what happened and to ensure that this never, never, never can happen again.
What is going to happen to our children and grandchildren?
He never would have gotten that letter had he told the truth on his application.
That's right.
What
He never
truth?
would have gotten that letter if
What
he didn't.
truth?
Pardon?
What truth?
What did you want him to say?
In the Waffen SS, he did
He
not
did
state
say
that.
It's on here. He did say it.
On the application
Yes,
for.
Yes.
it's on there.
I would like to see the application.
Yeah, you
It's
can
there.
see it.
It's on there.
But then there are other things that he omitted. Otherwise, Judge Reynolds did not single
Well, you can do
Anton
that
out. He don't know him. This man is a federal judge. The law is on the books. He violated the law, and I think if it's under appeal now, if you're right, the law will.
Yeah, we'll see.
How do you feel about this? No, tell me. How do you feel about this?
I think that we should have definite rules of evidence apply to all cases, and I don't think.
We'll be
Mark.
back tomorrow at 10. Thank you, everyone.